The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion has always portrayed a more mysterious and sinister aroma than its successors, Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls Online. With subjectivity, there has always been a second thought and hesitancy before general exploration and wandering into an unmarked cavern or fortress. The lighting, aesthetics, details, sounds, and music design created around the province of Cyrodiil leaves the player with a very authentic feeling of caution and danger when leaving civilization. Even in the cities where the player expects to feel safe and secure, there are hidden threats, paranormal activities, and malicious trickery that will render the player always on guard. In today's video, we'll be discussing an eerie and unsettling quest in the game of Oblivion that would make even the hero of Kvatch's skin crawl. The Daedra of Oblivion are akin to religious and biblical antagonists, evil spirits, and entities that wish to manipulate and torment the races of Tamriel for their own pleasure or gain. The quest we'll be looking at is simply titled Vermina. Vermina is the Daedric prince of dreams and nightmares and has a shrine southwest of Shadenhall. The player must be at least level 5 to start this quest, and when they do, they begin by talking to Amar Duar, a Dunmer worshipper. They tell the player they must offer a black soul gem to Vermina, and when done so, Vermina's voice will respond to the player by saying, "We meet again, mortal, for we have met before, whether you know it or not. When you mutter in your sleep, you speak to me. When you waken wet with sweat, you've just left my house. I dwell in your dreams. I savor your nightmares. Now, you will serve me. The wizard Arkved has the orb of Vermina, snatched from the dreams of my followers and dragged into the waking world. Travel to his tower and retrieve my orb. Take care though, mortal. In my orb, Arkved has found more than he bargained for." The player then must go slightly south to the marked location on the map, where the Wicked and Twisted lies ahead. The tower contains 8 different zones that must be made through in order to complete the quest. The first zone is simply titled Arkved's Tower, where everything seems normal. The first room you enter is dimly lit and features a table, silverware, chairs, plates, vases, and candles. Everything seems normal, so the player continues on ahead. The next room of significance features the exact same setup, however everything is flipped upside down and stuck to the ceiling, indicating something more is happening at this tower. As the player moves along, they then enter an open room where the lighting quickly turns red, and from the shadows, Daedra emerge for the attack. After dispatching of the Daedra, the next room is slightly ahead and titled Arkved's Void. Arkved's Void is a giant, dark, open space. It has thin, narrow bridges similar to what you see in the plains of Oblivion, and falling off into the abyss below results in the player's death. The bridges cross and intertwine, and the player must find their way out of the darkness, stumbling over boulders as they do so. After working your way to the end of the chasm, there is a door leading to the next area titled Arkved's Lost Halls. Upon arriving in the Lost Halls, the player will enter a room where they have to fight 3 more Daedra. This room has mysterious trees growing out of the ground and into the ceiling, as well as multiple pathways leading to different doors. Should you decide to take the pathway straight on, you will fight 1 more Daedra and be at the foot of a door titled Arkved's Oasis. Here, the player sees an evil, eerie, and barren landscape where they will have to jump down to reach the oasis. If you do not wish to succumb to fall damage, you can go back the way you came. If the player is looking for a slight shortcut to avoid some combat, jump down into the hellscape below and take some serious fall damage. There is a doorway that will lead back into the Lost Halls, but right next to a doorway to the following zone. By going back inside the Lost Halls, you can continue onwards through the nightmarish dungeon. The rooms that greet you have blood, corpses, and human remains that give off a truly sinister feeling. You will face off against 3 more Daedra and end up in a room that has oversized furniture and wine, showcasing Arkved's imagination. The door ahead is titled Arkved's Hall of Changes. Arkved's Hall of Changes is by far the most dangerous zone so far, with the player having to face multiple Daedra and navigate through dead-end passageways, all the meanwhile dark Welkenstones are shooting at and causing damage to you. The correct passageway will lead you to a torture chamber with blood, dead zombies, and another Daedra. There's a trapdoor on the floor titled Arkved's Retreat. Upon going in here, you are faced with what might be the most disturbing room yet. The player descends down a ladder onto a single platform to overlook dozens of hanging, rotting bodies, with some even being on fire. It is pitch black in all directions with a few pillars of fire showcasing the grim depths of whoever these people were. The player's only option is to go back up the ladder from where they came. Back into the Hall of Changes, there are two new ways the player can go. One doorway leads to a dead end, and the other is the correct way for continuing on into the Labyrinth of Anguish. The next room contains two more Daedra and another Welkin stone that actively saps you of your health. This room, similar to the last two, has two passageways. One is again a dead end leading nowhere, and the second one leads to a trapdoor titled Arkved's Rending Halls. The Rending Halls are tight corridors filled with Daedric enemies waiting to attack the player. Fairly straightforward yet deadly if you don't take your time or are simply underleveled. There are 6 Daedric enemies altogether, and once they are dispatched, towards the end of the corridors, the player is met with ghastly sightings of blood and rotting corpses littered all over the hallways. There's an eerie high-pitched melodic noise coming from the ladder which leads up to the next area, which is titled Arkved's Death Quarters. Upon entering the final zone, the player is greeted with red, menacing lighting and a very ominous setting. After walking through an ancient portcullis, you see the sight of a room that is overgrown with Daedric elements. You see a person laying unconscious in a bed that has been turned into a prison by Daedric-infested spikes. There lies the wizard Arkved, whom, after taking the orb of Vermina, has been haunted and sentenced to live out his nightmares and twisted realities for the rest of eternity. There is a small table in the corner of the room that holds the key quest item, the Orb of Vermina. This needs to be taken in order to get out of this evil place. But perhaps the worst and most frightening part of this entire quest are some notes that have been written and are sitting on the table next to the orb. The first note is sitting neatly on the table, and it reads, "A note is written in a trembling hand. There is no world so great as the world of the mind. There is no voyager so well traveled as the traveler in the land of the dreams. There is no abyss so deep as the well of terror that lies within each of us. I have plumbed its depths. I have seen the unthinkable. I am unafraid. Even death's boundaries do not confine me. I am the lord of limitless space and the master of place and time. Through the doors of sleep, the universe lies waiting for me. I will no longer wait for my dreams to carry me worlds away, to unknowable deeps, to unspeakable vastness. I shall dwell in the house of Vermina, forever, the orb of my companion. There is no compass to my destination, no end to my journey. My mind is the eternal voyager, fearless and wild with wonder in the halls of horror." While certainly up to interpretation, it seems this piece of paper was written after he had taken the orb and was expecting to gain knowledge and power beyond any mere mortal with this artifact. However, there are 2 more notes, crumpled on the table and crumpled on the floor, that paint an even scarier picture. The paper on the table reads, "I shall lie here in the dark, waiting for death." And the final note on the floor simply reads, "The horror, the horror." And with that, the player will go through a wooden door, finally getting to escape the horrid nightmare that is Arkved's Tower. Upon arriving back at the shrine and interacting with Vermina, their dialogue continues with, "My orb is returned, and Arkved will live out the rest of his days in nightmare. It is fitting. You have proved yourself, mortal. It is fitting as well that you should bear my token." To which the quest is completed and a reward given to the player. While never needing to go back to the cursed and disturbed tower ever again, you can't help but think about the wizard Arkved, his eternal suffering, and just how disturbed the land of Tamriel actually is.